Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz saxophonist Oded Tzur. We caught up with him in Brooklyn on April 14, 2020, during the beginnings of the COVID-19 lockdown to talk about his new 2020 CD, Here Be Dragons. His work draws influence from the art of storytelling and explores relationships between ancient and modern musical traditions. And that curiosity for improvised music led him to discover the ancient art of Indian classical music. He's got a great mix, a great story, and a future that is just beginning. Enjoy.
Well, hey, thanks for taking a minute out. It's kind of an extraordinary time, and I really have been wanting to reach out to musicians to talk about not only new music, but their lives in music and what's going on. So thank you for taking a minute. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let me go ahead and start off here and ask you, you have a new CD called Here Be Dragons. Talk to me a little bit about this album and releasing it during this time in our world.
That's an interesting question because the album was released just before all of this started to happen. You know, so when I recorded the album, when I released the album, I wasn't thinking about any of this. But the kind of the weird thing is that the subject of the album, in some ways, is fear and the unknown. And I composed the album thinking about these things and how we react to fear as individuals and as a society, and so on and so forth. So things all of a sudden plunged into this very uncertain time, just as we finished the release tour of the album. And I don't know what to tell you. It's a very sad time. I was very lucky. The release tour, all our concerts were done right as things started to get, really out of hand. So I could go back to New York and get back home, and I'm okay. But it's very weird and sad seeing all of my colleagues having to cancel so many tours. And I'm hoping everybody's going to get to the other side of this.
Absolutely. So talk to me a little bit about where you grew up and kind of how jazz became a part of your life.
Yeah, so I grew up in Israel, in kind of around Tel Aviv, you could say Tel Aviv, and I was part of the jazz scene that is very vibrant actually in Tel Aviv. I was 100% a straight-ahead jazz musician. My heroes were Dexter Gordon and Lester Young and Hank Mobley and John Coltrane and so on. And at a certain point, I kind of confronted this question of what is my native language within all of this. Even though I love Dexter Gordon so much, is his music my music, or is Israeli music my music? Or is maybe flamenco music that I also love, is that my native language in music? And these questions kind of took me in a gradual process to discover Indian classical music, which is how I sort of became known for a little bit later, because I started to play Indian music on the saxophone and develop a method for that to happen.
Talk to me a little bit about, coming to America. Was that a dream of yours? And what kind of culture shock was that to get, to move from another country?
Well, I moved to the Netherlands first. I lived in the Netherlands for about 4 years before I moved to the U.S. But I think that New York is a culture shock for pretty much anybody. I usually like to ask people who move to New York from elsewhere in the United States if it's a culture shock for them as well, and they usually say yes. It's as you know, such a hectic and chaotic place. But that's also what's amazing about it. It really overwhelms you. And then if you manage to survive the initial shock, it's really like no other place. And one thing that I think I find particularly fascinating about New York is just how extraordinary everyone is that you're surrounded by, like the people that you're surrounded by. Everybody here is just so incredible at what they do, and to me that inspires me to try to do my best, at any given moment. That's very important in my view. If you want to do something in music, I think you need to do something unique, something that isn't average. That's just my personal view, and New York is really the place for that.
What do you like best about being a professional musician?
That's an interesting question. What I like best, I don't know if I ever stopped to think about it, because being a musician is just my nature. So that's what I am. I guess it does feel, I feel privileged to be able to present people that I've never met with my music on stage. That is a magical thing. I definitely would say this is what I like best about it. Being on stage, having this song that I wrote, when I was going through a certain period in my life, or when I was thinking about a particular subject that's very intimate to me, very personal to me maybe, and then be able to share that piece of music with people that are essentially strangers to me, and share this magic of being together, even though we don't know each other, that music has to offer. That's my favorite thing, for sure.
What was one of the first live jazz shows you ever saw that made you think, man, this is what I want to do with my life?
I really don't know, because I don't think it was a live show that made it happen for me. I think it was a bunch of recordings, you know what I mean? Because in Israel, well, of course, there are live shows, but before I saw anything that really blew me away, I heard, Go by Dexter Gordon, and Blue Train by John Coltrane, and Dizzy Bird at Carnegie Hall, Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker. I heard these recordings, and what was coming out of this really blew my mind and made me feel like, other than being completely, in the sphere of magic, what these people are doing is just completely unbelievable, and I want to do the same thing.
So why do you love jazz?
I think that jazz is a language that dances on this gray area between what is fixed and cultured and kind of touching the past, and everything that is free and in the future and improvised. Indian classical music also has that kind of element. It's always between what is composed and fixed and in the moment. So these two musical traditions are very similar in that aspect. Speaks to me in jazz, that conversation between composition and improvisation.
We are obviously in a very extraordinary time with COVID-19 and the music is stopped, but when we do get back to live music, what do you hope both the musician and the audience member realizes during this time that is, a revelation, so to speak, when we come back to the music?
Wow, that's a very challenging question to answer because, I actually have several thoughts about it, and family members of mine tell me things and my friends say things about this, that maybe people will realize that we have more than we need and there are so many things that we take for granted in our day-to-day life, and maybe we don't need to be so, materialistic or whatever. People have different opinions about it. I don't really know. Maybe one thing that would be good for all of us to realize is that when we are actually on stage or like in a concert, we are sharing together something that is rare, that we shouldn't take for granted. And maybe even, if I dare take another step in this, we can appreciate the fact that musicians work so hard in order to produce their music. Maybe people would be encouraged to purchase albums and music in general rather than only stream it, which I know is probably a way too optimistic of a goal, but that's something that I think every musician kind of thinks about. So that's what I would say, I guess, for now.
My final question to you is this. Everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, and your fans, but you're living your life. Who do you think you are?
I think I'm a person, like anybody else, that loves sound to an extraordinary degree, I would say. And I think that I try to put everything that I have, my thoughts and my feelings, into sound in order to share them with others. That's what I would say.
That's a great answer. Hey, man, thank you during this very extraordinary time. It's very strange, surreal time in our world to talk about music and jazz and everything. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Israel, New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Oded for his time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.